Picture spending 6 hours of your day chewing. Not eating, chewing. Jaw working, molars grinding, the same dull mechanical labor, hour after hour, from the time you're old enough to feed yourself until the day you die. No lunch break from it, because it is lunch, and breakfast, and dinner, and most of the time in between. That's not a punishment. That's just being a great ape. A gorilla your size spends most of its waking life with something in its mouth, because raw leaves and raw stems and raw everything give up their calories slowly and stubbornly. And the only way to get enough is to basically never stop. Now think about your own day. You probably spent, 40 minutes? Actually chewing. Maybe less. And you had time left over for every single other thing a human life contains. Something happened to your ancestors that happened to no other animal that has ever existed. They found a way to cheat, to get the calories without the grind. And the thing they stumbled into didn't just change their menu. It rebuilt their bodies, reshaped their faces, and, this is the part that sounds made up until you sit with it, it grew their brains. This is the story of why we cook. Because here's what nobody points out about cooking. Every other animal on Earth gets by without it. Lions don't sear. Otters don't sauté. Your dog would eat a raw steak off the kitchen floor and feel fantastic about it. Cooking is so completely normal to us that we forget it's the single strangest thing our species does. We take food that is already, by any reasonable standard, food, and we hold fire to it until its chemistry changes, and only then will we eat it. A raccoon would find this baffling. And we don't do it now and then. We do it constantly. Run through your last week and try to find a meal that touched no heat at all. A salad maybe. Some fruit. The exceptions are so rare we made a special word for them. Raw. As if cooked is the natural state of food, and the unheated stuff is the weird exception. For every other creature alive, it's the other way around. So why us? When did this even start? And why did it stick so hard that we ended up building a whole civilization of stoves and ovens and that one drawer in your kitchen with 40 utensils crammed into it? The answer most people carry around is reasonable. It's also, in the way that matters most, completely backwards. Here's the version you've probably absorbed somewhere along the way. Early humans were getting smarter. At some point, clever enough, they figured out fire. And once they had fire, they realized, sensibly, that meat tasted better cooked, that it was easier to chew, that it didn't make them sick as often. So they started cooking, the way you'd pick up any good idea once you were smart enough to have it. Cooking, in this telling, is something intelligent humans invented. A nice upgrade. A reward for already being clever. That's a perfectly fine story. Most sources tell some version of it. It has the comforting shape of all the best just-so explanations. We got smart, then we got fire, then we got dinner. The problem is the timeline. It falls apart. If cooking were just a smart idea we picked up once our brains were already big, you'd expect the big brains to show up first and the cooking to follow. That is not what the fossils show. The bodies start changing, dramatically, unmistakably, long before there's any clear sign of a kitchen anywhere. Teeth shrink, jaws shrink. That whole heavy chewing rig every other ape lugs around starts wasting away, in a creature whose brain is ballooning at the same time. And it's all happening more than 1 million years before the archaeology hands us anything you could confidently call a controlled fire. So you've got a body that already looks like it's been eating cooked food, soft food, easy food, half-processed food, hundreds of thousands of years before we can prove a single soul was cooking. Which leaves a strange question hanging in the air. What if we don't cook because we got smart? What if we got smart because we cook? This is the part most explanations walk right past. The person who chased that question hardest is Richard Wrangham, a Harvard primatologist who spent years in the forests of Uganda watching chimpanzees eat. And what he kept circling back to was the arithmetic of the body. Specifically, how much it costs to keep one running. Your brain is a disaster of energy consumption. It's about 2% of your body weight, and it burns roughly 1/5 of your calories, all day, whether you're solving equations or fast asleep. Pound for pound, it is the single most expensive tissue you own. And a brain that size should be flat out impossible for an animal that eats the way apes eat, because there just aren't enough calories in a day of raw food to pay for it. So where did the money come from? Wrangham's answer is the quiet bombshell sitting at the center of all this. It came from your gut. Cooking does something to food that no amount of chewing ever could. Heat unravels the proteins, bursts the starches open, breaks down the tough parts that fight your digestion. It does outside your body a huge share of the work your stomach and intestines would otherwise have to grind through inside it. And once fire is doing that labor for you, you don't need the heavy industrial digestive system anymore. You can run a smaller one, a cheaper one. So the gut shrank. And the energy that used to run that long, expensive, raw food wrestling gut came free. And got poured straight into the one organ greedy enough to spend it all. Cooking didn't show up after the big brain. Cooking is what paid for it. Two scientists, Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler, put an actual number on this back in 1995, and the number is startling. They worked out that the human gut is roughly 40% smaller than it has any business being for a primate our size. Not a touch undersized. Almost half of it gone. And nobody chose that. No ancestor sat down and decided to surrender part of their own digestive tract. It simply shrank, generation after generation, because it no longer had the full job to do. The fire was handling the rest. The brain and the gut, as it happens, are the two priciest organs in the entire body. Trade size on one, and you free up exactly the room you need to grow the other. The body ran that cost-benefit analysis with nobody aware it was happening. It just rebalanced its own books. You are walking around right now with the result of that trade humming behind your eyes. And it isn't only that a smaller gut does less work. Cooked food simply gives up more of itself. A Harvard researcher named Rachel Carmody pinned this down with an experiment that sounds almost too plain to be revolutionary. She fed mice meat and sweet potato, prepared 4 ways: raw and whole, raw and pounded, cooked and whole, cooked and pounded, and measured down to the gram how much each animal actually got out of each version. The cooked food won every time, for both the meat and the potato, and it beat mere pounding handily. Same food, same amount on the plate, more energy pulled out of it once it had been through fire. The twist underneath that result is the part worth sitting with. A raw sweet potato and a cooked sweet potato don't hold different amounts of energy. The difference is how much of it your body can actually claim before the leftovers pass through and out. Cooking is a way of getting paid more for the exact same meal. Raw food keeps part of the wages for itself. It's the reason the calorie number on a label is a bit of a polite fiction. Your body may bank far more from the cooked version than from the raw one sitting right next to it. You have been quietly overdrawing on fire your whole life, every meal, without ever noticing the account. You can see the whole bargain written into the skeleton. The ancestor where this really takes off is Homo erectus, who shows up around 1.9 million years ago. And to be clear about what that number means, that's before farming, before cave paintings, before basically every date you ever learned in a history class. So deep in time, the figure almost stops registering as real. Homo erectus has small teeth, a weaker jaw, a flatter face, missing the big bony chewing muscles its ancestors wore like a helmet. A narrower rib cage, where that bulky raw food gut used to sit. And a brain noticeably bigger than anything that came before it. Every one of those changes points the same way. Here is an animal that no longer eats raw. Its body has already let go of the tools for it. You don't grow a face that delicate unless your food is arriving soft. A team at Harvard later ran the numbers on how much time we actually spend feeding compared to what we ought to. For a primate our size, the expectation is brutal. Close to half of every waking day with something in your mouth. That's the ape baseline. The gorilla's 6-hour shift, the thing we opened with. Humans clock in under 5% of the day. We got handed back nearly half our lives. Every hobby you have ever had, every long conversation, every idle afternoon you've spent doing literally anything other than feeding yourself. That's the dividend on this one ancient trade. And then, a Brazilian neuroscientist, Susana Herculano Hausel, pushed the idea somewhere genuinely unsettling. She counted the neurons packed into a human brain, worked out the calories needed to keep all of them lit, and then calculated how many hours you'd have to spend eating raw food to cover the bill. The answer came back north of 9 hours. Every single day. Just feeding, just to stay conscious. There aren't enough hours in a day for it. A raw-fed brain this big isn't a hard life. It's an impossible one. That's the whole trade laid bare. No fire, no spare hours, no spare calories, and no room to grow a mind capable of wondering where it came from. Fire is the only thing that closes the gap. Which lands us on the obvious objection. If cooking is really this ancient, where are all the ancient kitchens? And the honest answer is that fire is a miserable thing to go looking for 1,000,000 years later. It doesn't fossilize. A campfire leaves ash and scorched bone, and ash blows away, and bone washes off, and almost all of it is long gone before anyone with a trowel turns up. The absence of a hearth doesn't mean the absence of a fire. Mostly, it just means the fire was a very long time ago. We do have some, though. In a cave in South Africa called Wonderwork, deep inside it, archaeologists turned up burnt bone, and plant ash and stone tools heated to temperatures only a controlled fire reaches, sitting in soil dated to around 1,000,000 years ago. And just this year, a fresh analysis pushed possible fire use in that same cave back further still, toward 1,000,003 years, toward exactly the window when those bodies were busy changing. The physical evidence is creeping backward in time to meet the biology, year by year, dig by dig. And the timing lines up with something else. This is roughly when Homo erectus walked out of Africa and spread clear across the old world, into landscapes with freezing nights and real winters that a tropical ape has absolutely no business surviving. You don't make it through a cold European night, or a night out in the open with hyenas working the dark, on body hair and optimism. Fire is warmth. Fire is a wall of light that predators won't cross. Fire is the thing that let a thin-skinned animal built for the African sun colonize half the planet. A creature that fragile, spreading that far, that fast, is hard to explain unless it already had some command of the flame. Then there's a site in Israel, on the shore of a long-vanished lake, around 780,000 years old. There, the burnt flint chips clump together, not scattered at random, but pooled in the same few spots, over and over, layer on layer. Researchers call them phantom hearths, the ghost of a fireplace, marked out by exactly where the fire-cracked stone keeps landing. The same family corner of the same campsite, used as a hearth across what had to be generations. And when scientists looked closely at fish remains from that spot, the teeth of the fish carried the precise kind of damage that gentle heat leaves behind. Someone was cooking fish, on purpose, beside a lake, 750,000 years ago. That's the oldest direct fingerprint of an actual meal we found. And it already looks completely routine. Not an experiment. Not a lucky accident. A habit. Let that land for a second. Nobody around that fire was celebrating a breakthrough. It was just supper. The most ordinary human act imaginable, already worn smooth by repetition, 750,000 years before a single word was ever written down. Here's where it stops being ancient history and starts being about you specifically. Because the dependence never faded. We didn't keep cooking around as a luxury we could drop if times got hard. We are locked in. Researchers in Germany once tracked more than 500 people committed to eating their food entirely raw. And these weren't ancestors scraping by on a savanna. These were modern people with grocery stores, blenders, olive oil, every possible advantage. They ate raw on purpose for years, and their bodies came apart anyway. They lost weight they couldn't spare. They slid into chronic energy shortage. And about a third of the women under 45 simply stopped menstruating. The body. Sensing it could no longer cover its own running costs. Shutting off the most expensive function it has. With a full kitchen. In the modern world. On a diet that other animals do perfectly well on, our species slowly starves. We are not animals that can choose to eat raw. We are animals that have to cook. Somewhere back there, a door swung shut behind us, and it never reopened. Think about the last time you stood at the stove, a little impatient, waiting for water to boil, or a pan to come up to heat, faintly annoyed the food wasn't ready yet. That small, everyday irritation is one of the oldest things about you. You were doing precisely what your body was shaped across 2 million years to do. Handing your food to a fire and waiting for the fire to do the part of digestion your gut gave up long ago. You can't smell bread in the oven or onions hitting a hot pan without your mouth answering before you've decided anything at all. That reflex isn't weakness, and it isn't greed. It's a 2 million year old circuit recognizing the thing that made you possible. Every cooked meal you have ever eaten, every one, all the way back to your very first, was partly digested outside your body by heat before it ever reached your mouth. You have never once eaten the way every other animal on this planet eats. You can't. The equipment for it wasted away in your ancestors before they were even fully human. Even the rawest thing in your fridge, the salad, the apple, the slice of sushi, is a small exception you can only afford because everything else you eat does the heavy lifting over a flame. We like to tell ourselves we tamed fire, caught it, kept it, learned to bend it to what we wanted. And we did. But it's worth being honest about the other direction of that deal. Fire reached into our bodies and rearranged them. It shrank our guts and our teeth and our jaws. It freed the energy that built the brain you're using to follow this sentence. And by the time the bargain was finished, we couldn't live without it. We didn't just domesticate fire. Fire, every bit as thoroughly, domesticated us. So the next time you're standing in front of the stove, waiting, give it a half-second of respect. That little flame is the reason you've got a brain big enough to stand there feeling bored while it works. Here's the thing I keep turning over, and I'd love to hear your version down in the comments. If cooking is the one technology that made us human, the one our bodies physically can't live without anymore, what do you think is the modern equivalent? The thing we lean on so completely now that 100,000 years from now, our descendants might not be able to live without it either.